Chapter 23 of The Brand of Silence. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Roger Moline. The Brand of Silence by Harrington Strong. Chapter 23. A Startling Story. "This is a painful subject for me, as you must be aware," Kate Gilbert said. "I shall tell the story in as few words as possible, and if you are a gentleman, you will not interrupt or cause me more suffering by protesting your innocence." "I promise not to interrupt," Sidney Prale replied. "I want justice and nothing more, Miss Gilbert." "10 years ago you were a clerk in the office of Griffin, the big broker, were you not?" "Yes." "Mr. Griffin took a fancy to you, after your father died and left you alone in the world without any money. He gave you odd jobs to do around his residence, fed and clothed you and arranged it so that you could go to school. Your uncle, the father of George Lerton, your cousin, would do nothing for you because there had been a family quarrel several years before. Had it not been for Mr. Griffin, you might have been an ordinary street Arab. He sent you to a business college after you had finished the public schools, and then he took you into his office and started you on a business career. You showed great promise, and Mr. Griffin was delighted and advanced you rapidly. You seemed to know the meaning of gratitude and worked hard. You were ambitious, too, always said that some day you would be worth $1 million. Step by step you went up the ladder. Then it happened that your cousin, George Lerton, obtained a position in the same office after his father's death. He had had the advantage of a college education and knew how to handle himself in the presence of other men, and yet you, after your early struggle and with an inferior education and inferior opportunities, easily outdistanced him. Other men began talking about you as a coming man, bankers and brokers, businessmen and financiers. Mr. Griffin finally gave you the post of chief clerk and adviser. You worked hard and seemed to be loyal and faithful. You got profits for your employer where other men would have caused losses. So he let you more and more into his confidence. You got to know the secrets of big deals, the inside facts of the country's finance. You spoke in millions, but got only a nice salary. Your ambition to be worth $1 million seemed to be not susceptible of gratification. Yet you saved money, and took advantage of small, solid investments now and then. After a while you met a girl and fell in love with her. She was the sort who wished wealth above all, and you soon found that out. You became engaged to her, however. Then a rival appeared in the field, a wealthier man. You realized that the girl was shallow in that she favored the man with more money, but you were so infatuated that you overlooked that. You wanted the girl, and, to get her, you had to have more money. Then you began to feel dissatisfied. You didn't want to grow gradually, as other men did. You wanted the foundation for a fortune, enough to use in a plunge in the market. You wanted to be rich as soon as possible. You began to think, perhaps, that you were not getting ahead. You worked in an atmosphere of wealth, you heard men speak in terms of millions, while you had less than $10,000 in the bank. You began to think that Mr. Griffin should do more for you, that he had not done enough. You forgot that he had picked you up and made you what you were, that you had so much more than other men who had not been equally fortunate in finding a sponsor. She ceased speaking for a moment, but Sidney Prale never took his eyes from her face. Be ungrateful to Griffin? He never had dreamed of that. He always had worshipped Griffin for what the broker had done for him. He realized what he might have been only for Griffin. But he had promised not to interrupt, and so he said nothing, merely waited for Kate Gilbert to continue her recital. "You made certain plans," she went on. "Certain big business deals were in the wind, and as Mr. Griffin's confidential and chief clerk, you knew all about them. There were millions of dollars involved, the control of several large companies, and more than that, for Mr. Griffin and his associates were fighting a group of financial thieves who were trying to wreck excellent properties for the sake of making a gain. It was a fight for more than money. It was a fight to keep big business honest, to drive off the wolves and make finance solid. It was a tremendous thing. And you, a boy picked up and educated by a broker, who had risen through his kindness, knew as much of the big deal contemplated as some of the wealthiest and most influential men of the country. There were men in the other group who would have given $1,000,000 gladly to know what you, a clerk, knew. You were approached by one of that band of financial wolves. You were willing to listen. You wanted money because the girl with whom you were infatuated demanded it before she would marry you. You believed that Griffin had not done enough for you, and you agreed to sell him out, him and his associates. Sidney Prale gasped, sat up straight in his chair, opened his mouth as if to speak, but did not when he saw the expression in her face. He decided to keep his word. "The agreement was made," she went on, "and you, who could have demanded $500,000 easily for the information you had, sold out your benefactor and his friends, and the decent element on the street, for a paltry $100,000. You sold your honor and your manhood for that. At this juncture the woman in the case informed you that she wished to break the engagement because a man of money, your rival, had asked her to marry him, and she wanted his wealth. Instead of seeing what sort of woman she was, instead of coming to your senses then and stopping your deal with the other side, you took the opposite course. You would take the money, betray your benefactor and his friends, and leave the country. With that money as a foundation you would build up a fortune. And that is what you did, Sidney Prale. You arranged everything nicely. You gave those men the information and received your $100,000, and then you quit your job and sailed away to Honduras. The battle began on the street, and because of the information you had sold them, the financial wolves got the better of the honest element. It was a battle that lasted for 2 weeks. The wolves met every move, because they knew everything had been planned. Fortunes were lost overnight. A score of big, decent men were ruined in their attempt to defeat the wolves and keep finance clean. Mr. Griffin, the man who had done everything for you, went down in the crash because you had sold him out. It was only 5 years ago that he got new backing and fought his way up again. Others went down with him, and some never regained their footing, because of what you had done, because you had played traitor. They knew there had been a leak, and there was an investigation. You had sailed away the day before the fight began, and that looked suspicious, for you had made up your mind suddenly. Finally it was discovered that you were the traitor in the camp. My father was one of Mr. Griffin's associates, Mr. Prale. He lost his fortune, of course. We could have endured that, but the blow cost him his health. He was a giant of a man at that time, the best father in the world. You should see him now, Mr. Prale, see what your treason made of him. He is an invalid who sits all day in his wheelchair. At times his mind wanders and he fights that battle over again and calls curses down upon the head of the man who played traitor. My big, handsome, rich father is a broken, thin-faced man whose voice is a whisper and whose hands tremble because of what you did, you beast." She began sobbing softly as she glanced through the window, and Sidney Prale started to get out of his chair. But she faced him again quickly and motioned for him to remain silent. "You wanted to hear it, and so I shall tell it all," she declared. "You had been clever, you had done this thing in such a manner that the law could not touch you. Yet you must have been afraid of it, for you fled the country.